Okay, the Talmud Torah is sponsored by Adam and Yudit Benzev in honor of their children, Jake Sarina and Rosie. And the Daf Yomi is sponsored by the Plunka family for the yahrzeit of Chana Esther Bas Eliyahu Eliezer. Okay, we are at the bottom of Pei Gimel Amud Beis, about 3 lines up from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Chamisha Dvarim Nemru B'Kelev Shota. So the Mishnah yesterday talked about a person was bit by a crazy dog. Okay, so what's the definition of a crazy dog? Piv pasuach, its mouth is open. Riru nodeif, its saliva's dripping out. Oznav sruchos, its ears are very big and tilted down. Viznava munach al yarkosov, and its tail is in between its legs. Mahalach b'tzidei drachim, and it walks on the sides of the road. V'yesh omrim af novach, vein kolonishma, some say another sign of this crazy dog is that when it barks, nothing comes out. No sound comes out. Mimai havi, where did this is like a dog that seems like it's possessed. So where is this from? Rav Amar Nashim Kishvanius Masachkas Bo, that you should assume that it was people who were doing like witchcraft and put some crazy tricks into the dog. Shmuel says you should assume that there's some spirit that got into the dog. My Beinaya, what's the difference whether I should assume it was because people put some type of witchcraft into it or because of a ruach ra? That when you go to kill this dog, should a person be careful to not get too close? If it's because of a ruach ra, so then the Gemara is saying coming too close to the dog could be dangerous, and therefore you should shoot it. Don't go too close. If it's just because of the nasha mesachkas bo, the people who were doing kshafim on it, so then the Gemara is saying it's not dangerous to get close to it. Tani kavase de Shmuel, we have a proof like Shmuel's opinion. That the Brisa says when you go to kill this dog, you should kill it with something that you could throw. Don't get too close to it. The chayiv be mistaking, somebody who comes in contact with it is in danger. The nachisle, somebody who gets bit by it is mayis, would die. The chayiv be mistaking, maitakante, what would be the way for him to be saved from his danger? Nishlach mane, v'nashdinu kamei v'nirit. Sounds a little interesting. Take off his clothes, throw it in front of it, and run away. Rav Huna Bredi Yeshua chaf bei chad minay b'shuka. Rav Huna Bredi Yeshua, this happened to him. This one of these crazy dogs, this Kelev Shota, rubbed up against him. Shalchinu l'manei v'rod. He did this advice. Amar kiyamti batzmi ha'chachma techaya ba'alel. He said, I fulfilled the pasuk which says, because of wisdom, a person can keep himself alive. Dinachis le'mayis maitakante. A person who got bit by it would die. What should he do to save himself? He should bring a skin of a tzavua zachar, it's a certain type of animal, I believe. He should write it, Ani planya bar palnisa. I am this person, the son of Palnisa. I just thought it was interesting. And normally we refer, right, when we get called up for an aliyah, we get called by our name, the son of our father's name. Right? Normally we're called by our father's name. Right? There's one exception, which is when a person's sick, we refer to them by their mother's name. So I just thought it was interesting. We're talking about a case where the person was sick, and you see like that in the Gemara, right? The Gemara said, Planya bar Palnisa. Palnisa is female. He was referring to himself by his mother's name. Just thought that was an interesting diuk. My father-in-law once told me that an explanation he once saw is that since a mother is very involved with a child when he's sick and taking care of him, and caring for the child, so maybe that would be a reason why specifically when a person's sick, we refer to the mother of the person. Okay. And he should write on this thing, on this material, kasiv nalach, I'm writing these words, kanti kanti klirus. These words, kanti kanti klirus. V'omri lo, and some say he should write the words, kandi kandi klirus. Those words, ka Hashem tzavakos. These are uses of Hashem's name, amen amen asela. So this is the script he should write on this skin. Then he should throw down his clothes, and he should bury them in a cemetery. Till a year. Take them out and burn them up. And he should throw the ashes all over the road. And during those 12 months, kishasa maya lalishti ela begufsa denachasha, that when he drinks, he should only drink out of a copper material, because if it's something which has more of a reflection, he might see the reflection of the shade of this spirit, which is damaging the person, and it could be dangerous. Abba bar Marta, who Abba bar Minyuni of the Le'i Megufsa Dadava, his mother made him one out of gold, similar thing, a material which doesn't show a clear reflection. Okay, but Od Amar of Masya. Rabbi Yochanan chash b'tzfidna. Yochanan got sick with a sickness called tzfidna. Rashi explains that it was a pain in the teeth, which meaning it started in the mouth. The gomer bibnei me'ayin. Rashi says, and it finishes in his stomach, in his innards, and it's dangerous. So Rabbi Yochanan got sick with this sickness called tzfidna. Azol gaba dahimatronisa. So there was a non-Jewish doctor who came to heal him. Of the lay milsa cham shamali shapsa. She healed him on Thursday and Friday. Amar lo b'Shabbos ma. He asked her, what should I do on Shabbos if I need another refuah? Amar lo tzricha. She said, you're not going to need it. Ima tzrichina ma. He said, let's say I do. What should I do? Amar lo yishtava li dom l'galis. She said, swear to me that you won't reveal my secrets. Ishtava lo l'kol Yisrael lo maglina. So he swore to Hashem, I won't reveal it. In other words, he was very careful in how he phrased it. He said, I won't reveal it to Hashem. Nafik darsha b'pirka. Then he left and he explained it to the other people, this refuah, this healing that the lady told him. V'yishtava lo l'kol Yisrael lo maglina. V'yishtava lo. Asked the Gemara, how could he do that? He swore that he won't reveal it. The Gemara says, no, he was careful in how he phrased it. He said, lo l'kol Yisrael lo maglina, hala'amu Yisrael maglina. He said, I won't tell Hashem. He was careful to not swear that he won't tell people. In other words, when he phrased the swear, he phrased it in a way that it was clear that he wasn't swearing to not tell other people. Ask the Gemara, ve'ika chilul Hashem. But there's a chilul Hashem. So Rashi here says, what's the chilul Hashem? Rashi says, she's svura she'avar al shvuasam. Chilul Hashem is, she's not going to realize that distinction that he made. She's going to think he really swore that he won't tell anybody. And therefore, when he goes and tells people, it's going to be that she's thinking that you're allowed to transgress a shvuah, a swear that you take. Gemara says, no, the megali lo mikar my avdalei. No, the answer is that he went back and explained to her why there was no problem in the halachas of shvuah with what he did, because he's explaining that I never swore that I won't tell anybody. I'm assuming the case is that they needed this to know this refuah for whatever reason, and this was the way to get it out of the doctor that wasn't willing to reveal it. As much as it seems like a little bit of a trick, I'm assuming there was for the benefit of people. This was the way to get it out, and he was careful to not transgress any shvuah when he did it. Amar Ravacha Brei de Ravami. Sorry, my avdalei. Nikar my avdalei. So what type of healing did the lady do for the sickness called safidna? Amar Ravacha Brei de Ravami mei seor shemen zayis umelach. Liquid, meaning some water that came from dough, mixed with shemen zayis umelach, oil, olives, and salt. Rav Yemer Amar seor gufei shemen zayis umelach. It was the dough itself mixed with shemen zayis umelach. Rav Ashi Amar mishcha de gadfa de avza, which Rashi says was a type of fat from a small bone in the wing of a bird. Amar Abaye Anad Avdi Lakulu. Abaye says, I did all of these for this sickness. V'loyitzi, I didn't get better. Ada Amar Liha Hutaya Aisi Kashaisa Dezaisa, till somebody told me, bring the seeds of olives, like the pits of olives, the Lamolitilsa, which are not a third ripened. V'kalinu benura, and you should cook them in a fire. Amra Chadata. Amara chadata, which Rashi explains means a new type of something bitter. Rashi is called pushir. Ve'adbik bekiki dari, and you should put that on your teeth, which was the source of the pain, this type of sickness. Avdi hachi vitzoy. So Bai says he did that and he got better. Mimai hava. What's the cause of this sickness? Michamimi chamimi dechiti, eating bread which is too hot. Umishuri kasa daharsana, or eating fish which was cooked with flour and it's the fish oil. Dishiura, which means that it was left out overnight. Umaisi money, what's a way to remember the cause of the sickness and the refuah, the way to heal it? Kadrami midi bekiki v'asadama mibidari. That the cause was putting something in the person's mouth, and the sickness itself was a type of bleeding which came from the person's mouth and went into his insides. Rabbi Yochanan kichash b'tzvidna, when Rabbi Yochanan had the sickness tzvidna of it hachi b'shabsav itzi. So Rabbi Yochanan had this sickness, and he did this refuah, this type of healing on Shabbos, and he got better. Rabbi Yochanan heichi of it hachi. Ask the Gemara, how could Rabbi Yochanan do this healing on Shabbos? Amr of Nachman bar Yitzchak shiny tzvidna hoel. Rashi says this next line, which we have, should really be taken out. Rashi says this is really a line from the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. So we'll skip one line. Amr le Reb Chia bar Abba Reb Yochanan kiman. Like which opinion in the Mishnah was it that Reb Yochanan did this refuah, this healing on Shabbos? Reb Masya ben Cherish. It's like the opinion of Reb Masya ben Cherish, the Amr, who said, "Hachoshesh bipiv matilon lo sam b'Shabbos." That a person who has a pain in his throat is allowed to take that medicine, like we explained yesterday, would mean even involved malacha in creating the medicine on Shabbos. So just to give a little background. In the Mishnah yesterday, right, everyone agrees something which is dangerous and a threat to a person's life, a person can break Shabbos to save it. We had a disagreement in the Mishnah that if you have a case where it's not so clear that the refuah would even solve the person's life, are you allowed to do it? So in other words, the case we had in the Mishnah where there was for sure a disagreement was a person who was bit by this crazy dog. It sounded like the refuah of the time was to feed a part of the dog to the person. So the first opinion, the Tanakama said that it's not proven enough that that's successful, and therefore you don't have any heter. You have no right to go and eat that prohibited food. And Ramasi ben Cherish said it's okay. Then the Mishnah said, Va'od Amar Ramasi ben Cherish, Ramasi said another case that a person who's choshesh begrono, has a pain in his throat, he can do malacha on Shabbos to create the medicine. So the question is going to be, does the Rabbanan, does the other opinion in the Mishnah agree to that case? Or do they also disagree? We know there's a disagreement by the case in the Mishnah of feeding part of the dog to the person who was bit by the dog. But then Reb Masya came and said another case, that a person who has this throat pain can do Chilul Shabbos, can break Shabbos to save his life. Do the Rabbanan and the Mishnah agree to that, or do they also disagree with that case? So the Gemara is asking, Rabbi Yochanan did that on Shabbos. We're saying that seemingly would only fit like the opinion of Ramasya ben Cherish, who is the opinion in the Mishnah, said you're allowed to do that. Now, Amrle Shani Omer Bezuv Lo Bacheres. Now, Rabbi Yochanan held that everyone agrees to that case, and the Rabbanan are only disagreeing with the first case of feeding part of the dog to the person. Okay, so that's what the Gemara's topic is going to be. Can we prove one way or the other whether the Rabbanan and the Mishnah agree that a person who has this throat pain on Shabbos is allowed to break Shabbos to make the medicine? I'll bring a proof to Rabbi Yochanan that the Rabbanan agree to that case. Because Misha Achse Yerakon, person who has a sickness called Yerakon, Rashi says it's a choli, a sickness, shepanav marikas, that his face becomes pale. You can feed that person meat from a donkey. A person who got bit by this crazy dog, you can feed it from the inside of the dog. And a person who has this throat pain, you can make that medicine, give him the medicine on Shabbos. That was all the opinion of Reb Masya ben Cherish. So that was three cases he said. Chachamim omrim be'elu, by these, ein behem mishum refuah. By these, that's not refuah. That's not a proper healing. So what's these? They're coming to argue on two, at least two out of the three. So which ones are they arguing on? Says the Gemara, I would read it as be'elu lemute mai, lav lemute sam. Aren't they coming to say that by one of the three, meaning the last one, I agree to you that you can do that on Shabbos. But by the first two, I disagree. Be'elu means by the first two, I disagree with you. But by the third one, I agree to you. So that would be a support like Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, who said by this type of sickness, everyone agrees that a person can do this malacha, the work involved in creating this medicine on Shabbos. Mar says, no, you can't prove it from the Brisa, because I could say, lo lemuti makiz and dam l'srunchi. I could read the Brisa as they're saying, the three which you, Reb Masya ben Cherish, listed, I disagree with all three. Which case do I agree that they heard he talked about a fourth case also, and on that fourth case is when they said he agrees. Hachanami mestabra. The Gemara says it's logical like that opinion. In other words, that you can't prove that the Rabbanan agree by the case of choshish begrona, the person who has the pain in his mouth or his throat. Titania shlosha dvar mamar bishval Reb Yossi sheshama mishum Reb Masya ben Cherish, that we have a brisa which records there was three things that was heard from Reb Masya ben Cherish. Makiz and dam l'srunchi b'Shabbos, a person who has this sickness called srunchi. So the way they would heal it was to take out some blood. And a person who got bit by this crazy dog, you can feed part of the dog to the person. And a person who has a pain in his mouth, you can give him this medicine on Shabbos. And the Chachamim say, by these, again, vague which cases they're going back on, but by these, there's not a clear healing, and therefore you're not allowed to do them. So when they said these you're not allowed to do, which case were they saying you could do? My love, atarti basraisa, lemuti dereisha. Were they not saying the last two I disagree with, but the first one, which is the person who had the sickness called srunchi, that the way to heal it was to take out some blood. Are they not saying in that first one I agree? Which would be a proof that that's the one, that's the case the Rabbanan are agreeing to. Gemara says, lo, tarti dereisha kamaisa lemuti deseifa. I could read it that they're saying the first two I disagree with, but the third case, which is the case of the person with the pain in his mouth or his throat, then they could agree that you're allowed to make and give the person that medicine. So just to summarize what we did, Rabbi Yochanan had the type of sickness in his mouth which required some type of breaking Shabbos and creating the medicine, giving the medicine. So we know that Reb Masya ben Cherish in the Mishnah said that's okay. The question is he assuming like that opinion, or is Reb Yochanan really assuming that everybody agrees in this type of case? So the Gemara tried to prove it, and we disproved it. We tried to prove the disproof, and we disproved the disproof. Okay, so we're holding by Reb Yochanan seemed to hold everybody agreed, but we can't prove it. Okay, top of Amud Beis. Tashema. Tani Rabba Bar Shmuel, that a lady who is pregnant and the baby, smells something which creates that desire for it to eat something, which we learned earlier is a sakana, could be dangerous. So we learned that you feed her until she calms down. Kelev shota, a person who's bit by this crazy dog. You can feed the person from the inside of the dog. And a person who has this pain in his mouth, you can give him the medicine. So that was all the opinion of Reb Masya ben Cherish. So we have another brisa that the Chachamim said, Bezu velo b'acheres. On this one I agree to you, but I disagree with you by the other. Bezu ahai. What do they mean when they said the word this one? What's this one? Ilema obra. If it's going back on the first case, pshita. Obra mi'ika lamanda amar delo. The first case, of course, everyone agrees that if the lady who's pregnant, who has this desire because of the baby inside of her, that the halacha was you can feed her, for sure everyone agreed to that. Even when we learned the Mishnah, the way it was presented didn't make any mention of a disagreement. So I don't need this brisa to come to teach me that's according to all opinions. That I would have already known from reading the Mishnah. So what is the brisa coming to highlight when the Chachamim say, this one I agree? It can't be on the first one, which is the lady who's pregnant, as much as it's true they agree, but I already know that they agree in that case. So which case do they agree that the Brisa is now coming to teach me. Elolav asam. The Gemara says that it seems like from the Brisa that the case they're coming to say, I agree, is the case, the third case, which is Rabbi Yochanan's case. The person who has the pain in his mouth or his throat can prepare and take the medicine on Shabbos. Shma mina, that's a proof like Rabbi Yochanan, that from this Brisa we really see that both opinions agree that a person with this pain in his mouth, that refuah, that healing, was proven enough to allow the person to break Shabbos to take it. Rashi says it sounds like that in reading the Mishnah also, that everyone would agree to that case, because it says, V'od Amar Reb Masya ben Cheirish, after it brought the disagreement by the person who was bit by the crazy dog, the Mishnah said, and Reb Masya ben Cheirish said another thing, which is Achoshesh v'piv matin lasam b'Shabbos, that a person who has this pain in his mouth can take this medicine. V'lo pligi Rabbanan alei. It sounds like the Rabbanan don't disagree. V'im isa the pligi Rabbanan alei, because if you'll tell me that the Rabbanan really disagree, which would mean they're arguing by two cases. They're arguing, number one, by the Kelev Shota, the crazy dog, and they're arguing about this case of the person with the pain in his mouth. Then in the presentation of the Mishnah, it should have put both cases together, listed both cases. The Reb Masya ben Cheirish said it's okay, and then it should have said, and the Rabbanan disagree. Saying, by the fact that the Mishnah quoted the first case and brought there's a disagreement, and then said, and there's another case. In the presentation, it sounds like that last case is something which everyone would agree to, which would be a support like Rabbi Yochanan, who was coming to say that that case is true l'kulei alma, is true according to all opinions. Okay, 2 dots, about 15 lines down, Peidal Amud Beis. Mipnei shesafik nefashos hu. Because the Mishnah said, Mipnei shu safik nefashos, because this is, it's a question of a person's life. It calls safik nefashos doches haShabbos. And if it's a question of a person's life, you're allowed to break Shabbos. Ask the Gemara, what is the Mishnah adding by saying the same rule again? Right? It said you're allowed to do this because it's a question of a person's life. And anything with a question of a person's life, you could break Shabbos. Sounds like it's hinting to another case which I wouldn't have known from before. Amr of Yehuda Amar Rav, what's the case? Lo safik Shabbazu belvad amru, meaning the first case of the Mishnah would have been the person's in danger today. It's Shabbos, the person's in danger. Says the Mishnah, break Shabbos, save the person's life. Elafilu safik Shabbos acheres. What the extra line is coming to include is even if the person's not in danger today on Shabbos, but he is in danger in the near future. Hey chidami, what's the case? Going to amdua letmanaya yomi, v'yomi kama shabsa, which means that the doctor said he needs to get this healing in the next 8 days. For 8 days, and the first day we're holding on is on Shabbos. The doctor says he needs this refuah, this healing for 8 days straight, and today's Shabbos. So my question is, should I push it off till Sunday and do Sunday to Sunday, which would mean only breaking one Shabbos? Or should I start today on Shabbos, which is going to come out, I'm breaking this Shabbos, and day 8 is going to be next Shabbos? So the Mishnah is coming to say, Mahu detema li'akev la'arta. Somebody would have argued, if it's not an imminent danger, so then a person should push it off till Sunday, start Sunday, to avoid breaking 2 Shabboses. Kamash V'lan says the Mishnah, no, that even though the person is not in imminent danger, it's obviously something which eventually is life-threatening, so you should start the refuah, start the healing today on Shabbos, even though it's going to result in an extra breaking of next Shabbos. Tanya Nami. Add food for him on Shabbos, if it's necessary for his well-being, bein lahashkosa, bein lahavroso, or to get whether to give him to drink or to give him lahavroso, which Rashi says to be able to wash him off in order to make him healthier. V'lo Shabbazu belvad amru, and the Gemara is bringing it for this line that it's not only true if he's in danger on this Shabbos, elo l'Shabbos acheres. It's true even if the danger is not in the direct future. It's only relevant a little, and today it's only in the very near future. Vein omrim namtin lo shema yavri. We don't say let's wait a little bit, see if he gets better without breaking Shabbos. Elo mechamelo miyad. No, you could break Shabbos right now, because if a person's life is in danger, you break Shabbos, and not only if it's to this Shabbos, even if it's a question of breaking next Shabbos. Okay, the Brisa continues. Vein osen dvarm halolu lo al yedei nachrim v'lo yedei kusiyim, that a person shouldn't do these things based on a non-Jew. Ela al yedei gedola Yisrael. He should look for the most righteous person to break Shabbos to save the chola, to save the sick person. So one explanation for this would be is that meaning the Jewish person is going to do it with much more excitement for the mitzvah of saving a person's life, just like a mushal, right? There's a reason, Rahman al-Islam, but people we call Hatzalah because they're known for getting there very, very quick, because they take it very, very seriously, the appreciation of saving a person's life. They get there very, very quick. So you should look for the person, but it also says you should look for the Gedoli Yisrael, which means you should look for like the Rav to come and save the person's life. So the explanation for that would be is that if just a normal person breaks Shabbos to save a person's life, a person could get confused as to what crosses the line of a legitimate reason to break Shabbos to save a person's life. So if you have the Rav do it, who is able to know the halachas better, so then it could be less of a mistake in the future of where to draw the line of breaking Shabbos. The way we have the Gemara, it says that when you're assessing if a person needs to break Shabbos, you should not trust the opinion of a non-Jew. The way I would understand that one is if a person has an appreciation of the specialness of Shabbos, so then in his mind, if it's a question, should I break Shabbos for the sake of the person's life, there's two conflicting things. One is the specialness of Shabbos, and one is the specialness of the person's life. So a person will do an accurate assessment, which is, should I give in and break Shabbos for the person's life, or if it's not a danger, so then Shabbos has precedence. If a person doesn't have any appreciation of the specialness of Shabbos, so then in his head, it's a totally different question. Well, what's the big deal breaking Shabbos anyway? You might as well not take any chance and drive. So the Gemara is saying that you should use the assessment of a Jewish person who has the appreciation of the specialness of Shabbos, so that he'll make the proper assessment. But the Brisa also said you shouldn't trust the opinion of women. So I saw in the back the Rush brings that some Rishonim were very bothered. That why would it be? Why would it be you shouldn't trust the assessment of women any more than men? They were so bothered that they changed the Girsa and the Gemara. They changed it to say the exact opposite. You should trust women so much that even if she's disagreeing with men about, like Gemaras we had yesterday, one person said they need to break Shabbos, one says not. You should trust the opinion of women just as much as men, even if they're disagreeing with the men. Okay, so if you want to tell your wife a nice thing, you could say. Some Rishonim even changed the Girsa of the Gemara because they were so bothered that we shouldn't trust them. Okay. Another chat that's given over here is that you should use people, similar to what we were saying before. You should use people who were not concerned are going to learn from this experience and make a mistake in future experiences. Right? So the women who generally were less learned in terms of knowing the halachas, so the concern was that in the future, if another case came up, they might not be able to be medam and milsa l'milsa, be able to compare and contrast. Is this the same level of tzorich, necessity, to break Shabbos? So rather, it was more preferable to use the men who were generally more learned, so that they would be able to make the correct assessment in the future. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, mefakchen pikuach nefesh b'Shabbos, b'azaros harizim b'shubach. That when a person goes to save a life, a person who does it quicker, he rushes to break Shabbos to save the person's life, is a good thing. You don't have to go ask a question. You don't try to run over to the Rav's house and make sure before you save the person's life. If it's a question of the person's life, you go ahead and do it. Haketza. Examples. Ra tinok shenafal yam. If there was a baby that fell into a river or an ocean, Parush mitzuda maleu. So you throw out a net and you catch him. V'azar is harezu meshubach. And the Brisa adds, don't go ask a question. It sounds like that's coming to say, even though somebody would have thought that I'm doing something worse than the first case you told me, still you should do it. So what's that case? What are those words coming to add? Afagav, the katsayid kavari, even though when you throw out your net to pick up the baby, you're going to catch hundreds of fish, so you're doing many despite the fact that you're breaking Shabbos in the process. If a child fell into a pit, oker chulya maleu. So you can dig out some of the dirt to make it easier to get in and take him out. Don't go ask a question. Darga, even though you're also fixing a stair, which means there's another breaking of Shabbos happening in the process of saving the kid, it's fine. If there was a door, a child got locked in a room. So it must be the case is there's some level of danger involved. In other words, if he's locked in a room and it'll take 2 minutes to get him out and everything's fine, so then I wouldn't think we're going to do what the Gemara says, but must be some level of the child's going to get afraid and that could be dangerous, or some level of danger. You could break down the door, even though that's breaking Shabbos, soser. Sorry about that. Umotzio. Huh? It's somebody else, but it's also me.
Sometimes when people are close, they didn't mute. It could be someone that's maybe.
Should I just announce it? If everybody could just mute on the computer. Okay, Matzio Valzar is Harezu Meshubach. And a person who does it quickly. Okay, so again, this last case. Rosh and Nina Ladelis with Netinak. If a child got locked in a room, Shovra, you break down the door, Umotzio. And you take the child out, even though the malacha involved is soser, you're breaking down part of the building. You could do it. Vazar is Harezu Meshubach. If you do it quick, that's a good thing. Don't go ask a question. Even though you're benefiting because you're even getting materials from the breaking, which we'll use for building in the future, still that's fine. Means you could put out a fire. That's mechabin. Mafsikin means you could fill up jugs of water to stop a fire from spreading. Because of a fire b'Shabbos. Vavzar is Harezu Meshubach. Person who does it faster is even better. You don't need to ask permission from the Rav. Even though he's mamchik mekuchi, which Rashi says, even though he's gonna save coals for his barbecue tonight. And once he puts out the fire, he's still gonna save materials to use for cooking for the Motzei Shabbos barbecue. So you're gaining from the putting out the fire to save the person, still, it's okay. Utsricha. Says the Gemara, the Brisa had to tell me all of these cases. The Ashmin and Yam, if you just said the first case, where the child was in the water, there's a very imminent danger. If a person is not saved from the water, so then it could be very, very, very dangerous right away. But when the child's in the pit, so as much as there's some danger involved, it's not the same danger of drowning. So maybe I would have said, in that case, you can't be as quick to start digging up the ground to get the child out. Tzricha. Says the Brisa, no, even in that case with the child in the pit, you could do it immediately. The Ashmin and Bor, and if you just say the case of a pit, Mishum to Kamivis, I would have said the reason it's allowed by a pit is because the child is some level of afraid. Aval ninaladelas, but if he's in a normal room, just the door got locked, after Yosef by Gisa Mishabish Libam Guzi, maybe you could entertain him. You'll save the child from getting afraid. You'll throw him some nuts over the door, through the window, whatever. Basically, you can entertain the kid, stall a little bit until the key comes. So maybe there's no heter. You're not allowed to knock down the door. No, tzricha. Even in that case, where it's not an immediate danger and there might be another way to try to stall, still the person's allowed to go and break down the door. Mechaben umafsiken. The fourth case was that a person can put out the fire or put out jugs to stop the fire from spreading. The reason, what the Gemara is bothered is, that should be even more basic, right? A fire is very, very dangerous. That seems even more dangerous than the cases of being in a pit or a child being locked in a room. So the Gemara says, no, that's coming to add, even if it's a chatzar acheretz, it's in a different courtyard, so the fire is not even here, still, because of the concern of fire, which is a very, very big concern, it could spread, and it can spread fast, so a person's allowed to break Shabbos, even if there's a fire here and there's nobody there. But in the chutzner next door, in the next courtyard, there's people there. You can go and put out the fire because of the concern it spreads, which is very dangerous. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Lo holchu b'pikuach nefesh achar harov. Okay, Shmuel said that even though generally in the Torah we go based on rov, which is we learn from psukim, we learn out from the Torah that if a person is not sure, a person's allowed to rely on rov, which is the majority. For example, a person finds a piece of meat in the street. And rov, most stores in this town are kosher, and one store is not kosher. Okay, 9-1. So majority says it's kosher. Find a piece of meat on the floor. Obviously, it doesn't have a 7-mile sticker. If it did, then there wouldn't be a question. But I find a hamburger on the floor. It doesn't have any signs of which store it's from. So rov would say you can assume that it's from the kosher store. Okay, that's the halacha of relying on rov. Says Shmuel, when it comes to saving a person's life, we don't rely on rov, which means even if it's a minority chance that there's a Jewish person there that needs to be saved, still you go with the minority and you go and do what you have to do to save the person's life. In other words, you don't assume like the majority and therefore not do anything. Some say, no, even though there's a minority chance, still you go and save the person's life. Heichi dami, what's the case that he's talking about? If the case is that there's 9 Jews and 1 non-Jewish person, and it's a question of going and, let's say, a building fell down, going and searching, meaning, let's say you had 9 Jews, 1 non-Jewish person, and a building fell down on one of the 10. You're not sure which one. So if Shmuel's coming to say, in that case, you should go break Shabbos to save the person, Ruba Yisrael Ninu. That's much more obvious. Their majority says it's a Jewish person, so go ahead. So that's not what he's coming to teach me. Inami palgo palga, and if it's 50-50, so safek nefashos lahakal, that's also not what he's coming to teach me, because at best that's a 50-50, which should mean I'm not sure, and the rule is if you're not sure and the question is a person's life, you break Shabbos. So what case is Shmuel saying when he said, even though it's a minority still? Elo de'ika tisha kusim b'Yisrael echad. Gemara is saying maybe his case is that there's 1 Jew and 9 non-Jews, and let's say a building fell down on one of the 10, I'm not sure which one. So somebody could have argued, well, Rov says, assume it's a non-Jewish person. You're not allowed to break Shabbos. Says Shmuel, no, that you don't go based on a Rov. Rather, even though there's a 10% chance it's the Jewish person, still you go and break Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Hanami Pshita. That I also already know. Tahavale kavua. The kol kavua kemechza mechza dami. Because that's what the halacha called kavua, which I'll explain in a second. And kavua is kemechza mechza. That's 50-50. So kavua is another thing we learn out from a pasuk. In other words, there's one source for halacha called a rov, which means you go based on the majority. There's another source called kavua, which means that if you have a situation where the question arises to you when everything was in its original place. So in other words, the mashal I gave before was, I found a piece of meat, I walk out of shul and I find a piece of meat on the floor. So Rov says if the majority of the stores in my town are kosher, you can assume it's kosher. Okay, let's say a different case. Let's say a person's in a store and he picks up he's holding a piece of meat and he just forgets where he got it from. He doesn't remember if he brought it with him from a different store, if he got it from this store. But the question arises to the person while he's still in the store. He's not in the street. So that's called the suffix. The question began when he's in the makam kviyas, when he's in the place where the meats are. So that we learned from a different pasuk that in such a situation, a person does not rely on rov, that a person deals with it as 50-50. Even if 90% of the stores would be kosher, a person in that situation is not allowed to rely on that. He has to deal with it as a 50-50 question and not eat it. So the Gemara is saying, Shmuel said you don't go based on majority. Maybe his case was there's a 1 Jewish person and 9 non-Jewish people. And he's coming to say, still go break Shabbos. Gemara is saying, I would know that without him. Because if there was 10 people in this courtyard and a building fell on one of the 10, that means all my facts were right here, and the suffix, the question arose right here, so that's kavua. The question arose while everybody was in their place, and therefore, even without Shmuel's halacha, it should be regarded as if it's 50-50, even though technically in numbers it's 90-10. But the halacha of kavua says, look at it as if it's 50-50, and if you have a 50-50 question, halacha is you break Shabbos. So still, what case is Shmuel coming to teach me? Now, the case is where you can avoid this last thing of kavua. That if the people are traveling to the next courtyard, they were all here in one courtyard. Now they're traveling to the next courtyard, but if they're still in the process of moving, they're still traveling, so therefore it wouldn't be defined as kavua, that they're in their set place. And therefore, the halacha of Rov would say, assume it's a non-Jewish person. Still, Shmuel says no, that even though there's majority non-Jewish people, still for the sake of the person's life, you go with the minority and you go and break Shabbos. Mahu did him call the parish move of parish. You would have argued and said, you should go based on majority. You should assume the person that the building fell down on was a person that would not allow you to break Shabbos. Kamash Malan says, Shmuel, no, when it comes to saving a person's life, even though it's the minority, still a person's allowed to break Shabbos to do it. Ini va'amreb asi, amreb Yochanan tisha kusim Yisrael echad bosa chatzar, mefakchen. But we have a statement from Reb Yochanan that if you have one Jew and 9 Jewish people in one chatzar, in one courtyard, mefakchen, then if a building fell down, you would start digging to try to find who the person was. But chatzar acheres, once they're in a different courtyard, ein mefakchen, you wouldn't. So the Gemara is challenging. From him, it seems to be saying that if you have a case where it's rov, that the majority would tell you not to break Shabbos, you wouldn't be allowed to. Shmuel seems to be saying you would be allowed to. The Gemara is asking, how does that fit with Rabbi Yochanan's statement, which seems to say in the same case you're not allowed to? So lo kasha hadad parish kulhu hadad parish miktasayu. The difference would be if everybody went there or not everybody went there. The way Rashi explains it is if I know in this courtyard there was 9 non-Jews and 1 Jewish person. Okay, so we said if a building fell down in this courtyard on one of the 10, that's kavua, which means even though there's a 90% chance I can't break Shabbos, because of the halacha of kavua, I deal with it as if it's 50-50, and therefore I would break Shabbos. If all 10 went to the next courtyard, but they were still in the process of moving, so it's not technically defined as kavua, that they're stationary, and the building fell on one of the 10, that's Shmuel's case saying that even though majority would say you cannot break Shabbos, still you're allowed to, because you don't go based on rov, you don't go based on majority. The case that you would not be allowed to would be if you don't even know that there was ever a Jewish person in the second chatzar. The only time you can is if you know all 10 people made it to the second courtyard, so you know that there was a Jewish person once there, then your question is, when the building fell down, did it fall on the Jewish person? But if you knew that there was 9 non-Jews and 1 Jewish person in the first courtyard, and you know one of the 10 moved to the second courtyard and the building fell, since you don't ever know there was a Jewish person there, so then you would not have the right to go break Shabbos for that case. Okay, let's stop over here.